Greetings, Ranger fans. Jake here for another edition of Database Rangers Power Reviews, where we take a look back at our classic episodes of Database Rangers Power Reviews as we count down the 100 weeks to the 100th and final episode. Welcome to those of you joining in the chat. Welcome, Rudy. Welcome, Jen. Sorry that you weren't able to make it last week. And yes, Rudy, I have heard about the passing of the Queen of England. Condolences to all of those who are mourning. I recognize, obviously, there are many conflicting sides to the passing of a monarch. But as far as I have been able to ascertain, she basically appeared to perform well in a job that probably should no longer exist. So we shall see. But my condolences to any who are in mourning. So as you might have noticed, we are attempting yet another location this evening. Tonight, this is actually in the new studio. As you can tell, I've got the green screen down right now. Got a little piece of the set behind me. I don't have it set up in the usual configuration. I was a little strapped for time this evening because, unfortunately, when I was on my way to leave work, I discovered that I locked my keys in my car, and AAA took 2.5 hours to come and let me into my car. It was 4 times their estimated amount of time. I'm very tired. I am very tired. I'm a little sunbaked from being out and waiting all day, so I am a little out of it today. But it is wonderful to see you all filtering in. I hope you all have had a good week. It's been a little bit of a hectic week for me, as it has been the first week back of the new school year. So I'm back teaching, bouncing back and forth between 2 different locations, as I'm covering 2 different math subjects in 2 different buildings, and there's driving back and forth, and a lot of adjustment, but getting there. Welcome, Lumina. Welcome, Nightwing Josh. Good to see you both. So yes, I suspect that the studio might end up being the final location for streaming. I still have at least one more location I want to try out, but I am going to acknowledge at the very least that that this is definitely the easiest setup out of the available setups, which is one of the reasons I decided to do this one tonight, because I was so late getting back home and was so tired from waiting on AAA. So I think there are definitely plenty of advantages. Obviously, my lighting is here, my camera is here. You know, I've got a lot of my cables here. I have plenty more space. But at the same time, I recognize that I am also in this room next door to a sleeping toddler, so we'll see how that proceeds this evening. Probably fine. It was fine at the back at the old apartment, but it does seem as though sound carries a little bit more in this new studio than it did in the old one, due to the fact that we have hardwood floors rather than carpeted floors, so there's not quite so much soaking up of the sound as there used to be. Although I have purchased some carpeting to put down in here to try and soak up a little bit of the sound. And one of the nice things is I can actually use my entire green screen for the first time ever. You can see here, this is the very edge of it. This little crease here was because I didn't have enough room to use the full 10-foot width, so I actually had it folded over on both ends. So, for the first time ever, the other day, we were doing some filming, and I was actually able to use the full 10-foot width of the green screen, which was lovely to finally be able to do, although, honestly, with some of the crazy sequences that we're going to be having in 98, even the 10-foot width still had me a little cramped with some of the complexity of the action scenes between characters that we're going to be encountering. I there's a lot of fight choreography going into the next episode, um, and I'm still fine tuning some of it. But I'm hoping to get a lot of work done over the weekend, and I have been trying to make sure that I get work done each evening after I get home from teaching, and I have been making some progress. Most notably, having my stunt double over on Wednesday to just really hammer out the choreography, get caught up, and do a little bit of filming for some of the more complex one-on-one shots. So we are making progress on 98. It still has a lot of work left to go, so I'm hoping that this weekend, since MJ's actually going to be working from home, that I might be able to get a little bit more filming in than I normally would when it's usually just me and RJ. So we're going to be kind of splitting duties in that regard. I'll still be obviously taking care of them primarily, but I'll have that extra set of eyes that might allow me to sneak in a little bit more filming than I normally would on a weekend, which would be great because I have a lot to catch up on. All right, so Nightwing Josh, you said you're experiencing a little bit of lag, and yes, I have heard about the egg containers trick. I am considering that. It's just I would need a lot of egg containers to properly soundproof these walls. It's going to be a process getting it all together, and it's just been sort of in little fits and starts, getting everything put together. Because obviously I'm also trying to focus on the editing and the filming itself. So I've hung up some sheets. I have some cushions that I occasionally use. So I'm making do with what I currently have. And fortunately, there is going to be a lot of voiceover work to tend to. So that I think will make up for some of the potential echoes of the new space. We've been finding little workarounds that we can use in the meantime. So, that all said, I think it is about time that we start diving in to tonight's commentary. But before we do, let's not forget our 3 equally non-controversial phrases. So, number 1, say it with me, chat. Black lives matter. Number 2, say it with me, chat. Fascism is bad. And number 3, say with me, chat, superheroes are fun. So let us check in with our favorite superhero, one Mr. Database Ranger, as we dive right in to episode 88 of Database Rangers Power Reviews. Oh, wait, why am I not getting a signal? I see I plugged in the cable on this end, but not on that end. And I, fortunately, this time managed to spot it before hitting play, which is a slight step up from last week, which obviously had plenty of problems. Here we go. This is episode 88 of Database Rangers Power Reviews. We dive into the review of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, episode 12, Truth Discovered. And hopefully I don't have to... There we go. Loading up. There we go. It had been a little dicey there, so I wasn't quite sure if it was loading right. Now, as you see, we're getting this. We're getting our usual recap, and I realized after 87 that I actually was going to need to do a good amount of explanation in order to clarify the storyline for everyone. Obviously, there was a lot of stuff that happened in 87. We get these little snippets of all the different storylines that we had going on. It was like, 7 different subplots in a single episode, which is a lot. Especially for, just one episode that's not a finale. Interesting thing about 88. As you can see here, this is a reference to the Dino Charge Ranger logs, which I had started doing. I didn't ultimately end up continuing. But I had explicitly stated when I premiered them, during year 2, I think it was sometime, maybe around episode 73 or 74, during the Evil Database Ranger arc. I started doing those Ranger logs to have a way to review the new episodes that were still coming out that I knew wouldn't be covered in Power Reviews. And I explicitly said way back then that they were going to be set during year 3, so they were sort of a little preview of year 3. Oh, I got the little haircut there. Obviously, my hair is much longer now. The fun thing with this line, I didn't actually end up scripting that line. I realized when I sat down, I'm like, you know what? I want to actually give this thing, make this an actual acronym. And so I just kind of inserted it when I sat down to film. The fact that this is such a long monologue here, the fact that I was able to sneak in that bit about the hiatus, I feel quite good about. Especially since that is such a bit of technobabble. This outside of referencing the Ranger logs, also set up a new style for the reviews, the sort of confessional style review, as I think of them, which we will later see in the twin trilogies, where this format is later done by Mayo, Guy, and Dr. K. I wanted to have something set up here that those characters would be able to follow, so that it would make sense when they were doing reviews without database. I wanted to give them a template to work on, and I thought that confessional style template, that sort of, captain's log, would work well in that format, so that the characters could be explaining the storyline, while also flashing back to what happened in the intervening time. This also allowed me to have the overlapping storylines in the twin trilogies with with Guy, Mayo, and Kay all having parallel stories overlapping that you get to see from different perspectives. And yes, that explanation from Dr. K, I'm using my usual technobabble. I wanted to make sure to give all this exposition to the characters because, and that was not actually part of the original concept for the episode, to the extent that it is here. The thing is that I actually ended up writing episode 88 long after episode 87 had been written. Episode 87 was written well in advance of it being filmed. But episode 88 ended up not being written until much later. There was a large gap because I was so focused on filming and editing those year 3 episodes to try and make up for lost time that I ended up falling behind on my writing. And part of that was because I was in grad school at this stage. So obviously I was doing plenty of writing for grad school instead. And so, although I had written up through 87, I believe before I had even started releasing Year 3. I think I'd been writing 87 um, back in like um, 2016, 2017. And then I decided to jump ahead. Oh, no, I had started writing in 2016, and then I jumped ahead to episode 92 and started working on that because I needed to have the beginning and end of that written so that I'd be able to film 92 in the apartment before we moved out in 2016. And then then after writing the end of 87, I started writing episode 88, I believe actually in the airport while I was on my way to the, either on my way there or on my way back from the Power Rangers movie premiere in 2017. So that opening speech was written in 2017. But the rest of the episode wasn't written until much later, because I had finally shifted gears into really focusing in on releasing the episodes. I was working on grad school after that. So episode 88, I don't think I finished writing, actually. I don't think I went back to writing it until 2018, possibly 2019. I actually just double-checked. This episode was released actually on my birthday, which was fun. So it was a little birthday gift to me. And actually, Nightwing Josh, it's funny that you mentioned that this episode made sense in the context of what I was doing with K Alpha, because this episode was actually originally intended as a later review. Truth Discovered was actually the episode I originally had in mind for episode 95. 88 was actually originally going to be Friends Don't Fade Away from Jungle Fury. Because I thought that would be a good episode for the characters to provide emotional support to one another in the light of what they had gone through. But as I was looking through it, I was realizing, you know what, the events of this episode don't really tie in well. And after having written 87, which ended up being very complex and ended up being confusing for a lot of viewers, I decided to shift gears and do a more exposition-heavy episode. And I decided that Truth Discovered was the best parallel for revealing the fact that K Alpha is out there, so that everyone got in on what happened with Dr. K and her younger self. And in many regards, this is just sort of tying up the loose ends of the Time Storm arc, which I had originally intended to be complete by this point. As I established before, 87 was not meant to be nearly so complex as it ended up being. But 86 ended up kind of opening the door to 87. So yeah, I must not have finished writing 88 until 2019. 2 years after I started writing it. Because I had so much work to do in 2017, finishing the year 2 finale, releasing 81, 82, 83, and then 84, 85, 86, and I think 87 were all released in 2018, 2019. And then I went back to finishing writing this shortly after releasing episode 87. And a lot of people seem to appreciate that the characters took that moment to explain the visions from the Time Storm, because it had been so sort of, not many of the scenes were sort of in media res, There was very little explanation, but a lot of context to all the different pieces of what were going on. So Truth Discovered ended up being a good explanatory episode, and then I realized that in terms of Jungle Fury, Friends Don't Fade Away wasn't a great fit for what I was looking for, so I decided to do Path of the Righteous instead, placing that on episode 89. And then Rangers Leap of Faith got moved to episode 95. Because Rangers Leap of Faith was originally thought to be, that would be a good episode for the rescue of K Alpha, where Database gets for the rescue of K Alpha, the mission to rescue K Alpha and the uncertainty of trust there. And then Truth Discovered would have been a good episode for 95 because we would have been learning the truth behind K Alpha being behind all the events that were happening behind the scenes on the ship during the twin trilogies. But once I moved things around, Rangers Leap of Faith ended up being a much better fit for the reveal of Darkonda. This ended up being a much better fit for the reveal that K Alpha exists, and I felt like the whole story ended up coming together much better in that regard.
I've been waiting a very long time for that.
Yeah, it's always fun to have MJ doing the slaps. It's been just a great recurring thing throughout the series.
Was that a new attack?
The Ruby Blast. That one, that specific dispersion of the tachyon cloud surrounding him, was included specifically because Legacy Wars came out, and the Phantom Ranger was in Legacy Wars with the Ruby Blast attack. So I had not originally intended for there to be a Ruby Blast attack, because that was not something that he had ever done in the show. But once it became established in the game, Legacy Wars, I decided I wanted to include that here in Power Reviews as well, because I wanted to just incorporate whatever elements of Phantom lore I could. And we've seen DB keep remembering little things that he can do, as we saw with the Phantom Laser in episode 96 as well. Also, I found that the confrontation between Kay and the directors here paralleled quite well with the confrontation between Mitchell and Ryan, just in a very different way. And here we have Database piecing together some of the clues. And it's like, oh yeah, I was Venjix for a stretch of episodes. Yeah, that's a good reason for you not to have told me then. It felt like this was a natural way for Kay to finally tell Database about K Alpha, and for Database to finally tell Kay about about how he saw K Alpha with the Landlord. But right now, obviously, in this point in the story, he's piecing together what he's seen with the visions from Dr. K. Because Dr. K's flashback was different from everyone else's. Everyone else took on the persona of themselves in that moment. They weren't seeing a different version of themselves as they were dealing with that. Even the second ship was Mitch and Mary's memory of the ship. But the second K indicates that Dr. K remembered seeing a second version of herself. And this is another, exposition-heavy scene, because it's finally clarifying things that we kind of touched on here, touched on there, but never really just flat out said. And as much as I try not to info dump when it comes to the story, I try to lean into show don't tell when I can. I recognize also that the story has achieved a level of complexity where every now and again you just need to lay it out with all the pieces put together so that the audience can follow along with what's happening, and the characters are all on the same page with one another. Like, we'd heard the directors describe what they saw with Kay appearing in a beam of light and abducting her child self. And that was referencing the flashback that Kay experienced back in episode 68 through the lolcat. And this is where we get immediately direction on what we're doing in the Rift. And I'd gone back and forth in terms of when I wanted Database to be aware of K Alpha. And there was always just something else going on where he didn't have a chance to bring it up, that he'd seen her. I was thinking, they had to be going into the Rift, and they were going to be going after K Alpha. But for them to actually know about K Alpha, they needed to have a chance for a conversation, and there hadn't been an opportunity for that. So this moment is really, I think, nicely positioned because it allows us to transition into the next part of the story. The search for K Alpha, the rescue of K Alpha, the loss of Database in that rescue mission. Oh, sorry you have to leave, Jenny. I hope that you have a great week. And yeah, just digging into the absurdities of Ryan's backstory with Diabolico and how none of it really makes any sense in the context of anything else. I still, yeah. The timeline that he would even be concerned about a Power Rangers team makes no sense, because there were no Power Rangers active on Earth at this stage. Unless maybe Samurai Rangers, but even then, there was no evidence of that at this point. Yeah, Ryan's outfit is very, normal for a person who's been living with demons his entire life. That's so weird. But yeah, there's a lot to kind of nitpick with Ryan's backstory from Lightspeed, even while acknowledging also that the emotions of the episode are still very strong. And I was trying in this episode to also have some strong emotional scenes, especially the confrontation between Kay and the directors, which, every time that she has a confrontation with the directors, it somehow still feels like something that's overdue, even though we've seen her go toe-to-toe with them in other respects up until now. Her getting to just haul off and smack them, I feel like that's a cathartic moment. And I will also say, this episode ended up taking quite a bit longer to put together than I actually anticipated. I think this was actually, upon reflection, I think this was the only episode that I released in 2019. No, that wasn't the only episode I released in 2019. No, because I had released 87 in April of 2019. So I'm just trying to think real quick when some of the others were released, if I go back to checking my release dates there. Oh, and here we here we get the name K Alpha. After all this time, K Alpha. Because remember, the first time we heard a Greek letter designation for K was way back in episode 30. What was it? 37. No, not 37. 38. The rescue mission. When Dr. C referred to Mayo as K Gamma. And that was setting this up, 50 episodes ago. It's 50 episodes before we've set this up. Because there always had to be a third K somewhere out there. Because we had K Gamma, and Gamma is the third letter of the Greek alphabet. So this has been foreshadowed for 50 episodes. There is a K Alpha. And this is them finally acknowledging that that version of K is K Alpha and finally labeling her as such. So much. And there we go, kicking off the Ranger logs.
Until next time, farewell, and power, protect us all.
There we go. And there was episode 88. But yeah, that one ended up taking longer than anticipated to put together. Still not quite as long as I had remembered it being, but pretty long by virtue of the fact that those demon kids took a while. Like the animation on them is pretty limited. Like I had to, play around a lot with the texture and the opacity to get them looking just the right level of creepy. And it took some time. It took some work. And there were just so many of them, and they had to be attacking database, and you had to be fighting them off, and that was a bit of, those were like little bits of weirdness that I had to deal with. Let's see if I can, I'm trying to find when some of these things were released. Actually, now that I'm no longer trying to talk while it's on the screen, I can actually take a look. So yeah, 89 was a full year later. Because 2019 and 2019 was the year that I started teaching at the school where I teach now. So I just couldn't release anything during the school year. It just wasn't practical. It wasn't feasible. So yeah, there it is. Power Pink was December of 2018, and then Brush with Destiny was April of 2019, and then Truth Discovered was July of 2019. That must have been right before we went on our big, that must have been right around, either right before or right after we did our big vacation out to Disneyland, which was the last real vacation that we've had, because obviously after we returned, I got my job teaching, and then during that school year was when COVID hit, and so travel, obviously I wasn't traveling during that first school year, and haven't traveled at all anywhere since then. But it was nice that we at least got in that one big trip, and we were able to take a friend of ours to Disneyland who has a chronic illness and wouldn't have been able to travel on her own. So that was a that was a very good trip. and I had a chance to even meet with some of the people, with someone who was working on Power Rangers at the time, without getting into details, because I respect their privacy. We were in communications about some spec scripts that I had worked on, and unfortunately, they were not looking for writers at that time. But that was still probably one of the closest. That was probably one of the instances where I came closest to actually connecting with the writing staff and possibly having had an opportunity to write for the show. I've come close a few times due to the connections that I was able to make with people back at Saban Brands. Unfortunately, after Hasbro, multiple people left the franchise, and I no longer have those same connections of people that I've had those face-to-face interactions with. But I got very close. With regards to DB hasn't tried to look over Phantom Ranger episodes. Part of it is that it's a little bit of a complex psychological reason. One is that he already knows all the episodes very well, all the Power Rangers episodes very well. He already remembers everything from throughout the Power Rangers universe. Although the Power of Pink episode obviously did spark a specific memory. But you'll notice that, he was really just kind of, throughout, basically from the point at which he became the Phantom Ranger, we had the Winter Trilogy, where he was locked up with the Landlord. Then we had Super Megaforce episodes, with the one interruption being the Summer Saga. And the Summer Saga, the only episode that he reviewed during the Summer Saga was actually at Power Morphicon, where he was reading off a script by the alternate universe self, which is me. So nothing that he reviewed in year 2 was really outside of Super Megaforce. Nothing that he actively chose to review. Once he knew he was the Phantom Ranger. Then we got into year 3, and it's very much a matter of which episode is most relevant to the situation and the people he's talking with. And so there hadn't really been a chance for that self-reflection. And outside of just not having had that chance for self-reflection in many regards, and usually looking towards the most recent season to find out what new information is coming in, there's also the weirdness of trying to reconcile the idea that you are that character in that episode that you are watching. But it's sort of the same reason that Dr. K doesn't review Power Rangers RPM. The only RPM episode that she reviewed was from inside her own mind. And I kind of wanted to keep up with that, because I didn't, from a perspective of writing it, I didn't want the review to get too bogged down in the nitty-gritty of, oh, well, this was going on between the scenes, this was happening between the scenes. I prefer for the characters to be reacting to the episode as best as I can. Which is one of the reasons that the only Phantom Ranger episode that actually gets reviewed is in episode 90, and it's the Landlord presenting the review. Because it's sort of being forced to have that mirror shown up to yourself. But I will admit, it would have also made sense from a character perspective once he figured out his true identity, to try and see what else those episodes could spark. The way that the story is being constructed, that opportunity, and in certain regards probably that idea, never really had a chance to catch hold for him. Pretty much the point at which he figured out who he was already in the midst of something, and by the time he got a break from that, he was no longer thinking in those terms in many regards. I'm glad that all made sense. It sounded like rambling from my end, but I'm glad that ended up making sense. There's always so many different angles to come at with a story, and so many of those different angles can be valid at any given time. There's definitely arguments to be made over, like, well, could this review have also been an avenue for this part of the story, and how would the story have gone if it had been told through that perspective? For instance, if it had been Friends Don't Fade Away, among other things, with the original plan, they would have already known they were going after K Alpha. So what I really wanted to have at some point in that first half of year 3 that never really ended up happening was, I really wanted to have 1 or 2 breather episodes on the ship. That had been the original plan for episodes 87 and 88 to actually be breather episodes, for the characters to focus on their relationships, focus on their friendships, and recover from some of the traumas that they've been throughout the show. And I feel sorry for these characters that I didn't end up being able to give that to them. While 88 is, in some regards, a little bit of a breather, because we're no longer in the insanity of the Time Storm, and they do get a chance to talk out a lot of things, there is still action going on with the little shadow children. There is still conflict going on between Kay and the directors. And so I think it did end up making the whole story more dramatic in the end. But I feel bad for these characters because we never really get to see them have that break. I think I pointed it out when we hit it months ago now, back with episode 60, that was the last true couch review that Dr. K and Database get to have. Because, Database became Venjix, after that episode, we had the whole T Omega part of the arc. We had the Summer Saga. Database became Venjix and just wasn't him anymore. And then they had the holiday party and had to rush off to outer space and into the rift, and into the hiatus, and so that was sort of that one little last vestige of normality for them, with episode 60. And it's wild that's kind of how things played out. That episode 60 out of 100 is when they get to have that last vestige of normality. And it's sad for the characters. I think it keeps the story has been able to stay focused, but you do want to have little grace notes for characters if you can get the chance, because you do get to really feel for them, and you want good things to happen to them. Yeah, I know. Like, you just can't catch a break. Phantom Ranger has been through such rough times. And we've seen even more of that now through the comics. And I put this character through the paces so hard. Dr. K as well. Like that that woman, that character has been through so much. First within just the context of RPM, and then what I've had her go through since then. Like having to deal with the trauma and guilt of going back in time to try and prevent everything she had gone through, and to, in one respect, succeed because she created the alternate timeline in doing so, but at the same time, dooming that alternate version of herself to an even worse fate than she had, and then being trapped away from her friends for years, while she has developed that new friendship with Database and the rest of the characters here. She hasn't seen Gemma, Ziggy, the RPM Rangers now for literal years, and she found out that even though she may have succeeded in creating that alternate timeline, seeing what has now happened to the multiverse is a whole new level of guilt, as we got to sort of dig into in '97. Every character has been put through the paces. Every character has had to struggle with some sort of loss of self or loss of identity. Mayo in the Witness Protection Program, Guy as an undercover agent, the Morpotzners as resurrected hosts for a super demon. All of them have gone through this show not being able to be who they once were. And you think about all the implications of that, and it's heartbreaking. And I feel like a terrible person for doing this to all these characters. Even comparatively minor characters like R Beta and Dr. C we got to see in this arc have suffered tremendously in their lives. Really the only characters that you don't really get too much sympathy for right now are probably the directors, and to a lesser extent the secretary. Although she does get to experience loss as well when her daughter is absorbed in episode 95. So it is unfortunate that I make these characters all sympathetic through trauma. I probably need to find other ways of doing that, but I hope it is at least made for a compelling storyline. I'm hoping that again, as always, that the conclusion of this storyline is satisfying. I'm imagining that probably a few of you and possibly me as well might get a little choked up when we finally have to say goodbye to them after episode 100, and I'm hoping to make it a satisfying farewell. Yeah, the Morphonaut to Phantom Ranger transformation from the comics. Yeah, I would absolutely call that another loss of identity for him, because after all this, we still don't know his name. And as we've now learned, both through the combination of the comics and episode 97, we don't know even what his original face was. Database Ranger is the face of the character in this show, but we've now learned additional things about Database, and we know that this is not always, to exactly who he was. What his body looked like, what his face looked like. And we don't really know what that face was all those thousands of years ago. And that's kind of a wild thing that I was not expecting to actually be part of the story back when I started, because I was not expecting there to be new Phantom Ranger content after more than 20 years. By the time I finished this series, like at this point, we are now like 25 years, almost 25 years since the introduction of the Phantom Ranger into continuity. Because the Phantom Ranger was in fall of 1997. So I was not expecting that, this year we would actually get backstory on him. Anyway, it's getting late. It has been a really long day. And yeah, I think that does tie well into those themes of identity. Really, that's what the show has always kind of been about, without it necessarily explicitly being about that. Because me deciding to do the show was the result of me sort of feeling adrift in my life and needing to grasp onto something creative and reaffirm my identity. And, as a creative person, as someone who has passions, getting a chance to explore them, and getting a chance to realize what I wanted my life to look like and what I wanted my life to be. And I think I have managed to accomplish a lot of that over the decade of working on this show. And I'm really looking forward to finally being able to finish it, and find out what this next stage of my life will look like. Now that I am a father, a husband, a father, a homeowner, a professional in education. There's so many aspects of my life that did not exist when this show started. So this show has been, has sort of accompanied me on my own sort of journey of identity in many respects. And speaking of, how things eventually must come to an end, so must this stream come to an end. I definitely want to get some sleep after a long day, and I've got plenty more work to do on the show throughout the weekend. So before we head out, let's not forget our 3 remaining equally non-controversial phrases. So number 1, say with me, chat. Love is love. Number 2, say with me, chat. Trans rights are human rights. And number 3, say with me, chat. Robots are cool. and hopefully they're still figuring themselves out too and are able to enjoy that experience. So thank you again. I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, farewell, Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.